Welcome to the Big Success Show. Today, is it time to move on to a new job? Brought to you by FinancialFreedomTool.com. Plenty of money for life.
Big Success with the Professor and Mary Lynn.
Man, Mary Lynn, you ask tough questions. that question you just asked, is it time to move on to a new job? Trying to figure out when that is, trying to time that decision, that leap, I guess. It's one of the toughest decisions we ever have to make.
And I mean, with the pandemic that we've experienced, sometimes you can't time it,
Yes.
Sometimes
Sometimes plans change.
Yes, exactly. But this is something that we've both experienced in our lifetime, and I can't imagine there's anybody listening who hasn't had this. This feeling in your gut that says it's time to go, but then yet your head will say, and your heart will say, but wait, maybe not. I mean, I went through that quite a bit when I decided to leave my career to start Big Success, and I think this is definitely one of those times where it's good to have a piece of paper and you write the pros and you write the cons and, really just look over your reasons, what's going on in your head and your heart as to why you feel that it's time to go.
Yeah, we're going to actually share some tips with you that help you along. That was a great tip there, Mary Lynn. Just pros and cons, right?
Yeah.
That's always a good one. I call it the T, right? So you got the little T with the pros on one side and the cons on the other. But we're going to share some more of those today to help you really figure out if you're thinking about the timing. We'll help you figure that out.
What's something that you've done in the past when you felt like it was time to move? Like right when you were ready, because you've owned your own companies, you've owned your own businesses, you teach at the university. But when you were leaving one thing to start Big Success, what?
Well, and that's the best example because I had businesses and I had businesses that I didn't have at some point, but for me it was just there were a number of events. I won't go into it all today, but for the sake of time, but the main thing just came up to I just was stopping feeling challenged, and that lack of challenge, or maybe it was like I had some problems that I needed to solve, and it's like I didn't want to solve that set of problems. I wanted a new set of problems, and that's a great way of looking at a business, right?
Your same old problems.
But the thing is, even if you own your own business, you have to figure out when you're moving on, and to some extent, it's more complicated, complex, whatever you want to say, because it's not just you changing locations where you show up every morning or working from home or whatever. But it's you actually, selling assets and, there's all kinds of things that go into it is the point.
Right. So when is it time to move on? Carlin Flora writes about this exact situation in an article entitled Adieu to All That.
Adieu.
Adieu.
To you and you and you.
And it's published in Psychology Today. We have a link to that article in our show notes for today's episode. But one thing that she says is that when thinking about moving on to a new job, there are two extreme kinds of people. All right. So we've got the quitters on one end.
Yes.
And then over here on the other end, we've got the lingerers.
Oh, boy. You kind of lingered when you said that, Mary Lynn.
Yeah. So we got to pull the professor in on this. Tell us about the quitters.
Well, the quitters don't realize that the grass isn't always greener on the other side of the fence. Maybe they're walking through life with green shaded glasses. That old song about rose shaded glasses.
Right.
Maybe they're walking with green, but the thing is they miss out on opportunities that come to people who dedicate themselves to an organization. Changing jobs and or careers, that's not a surefire way to advance your career.
Yeah.
If you stick with a job, sometimes you may be able to be served better in that role than you would if you jumped to someplace else.
All right. So
don't leave too soon.
And don't talk to a quitter if you're thinking about moving on to a new job. They're going to say quit.
But, we've all met people like this, Mary Lynn, and sometimes you have to guard against this. There are people who just love change for the sake of change. And then there are people who hate change because they hate change. And I guess the point being that if you're one of those people, if your tendency is to just jump at every new challenge, you want to make sure that you're doing what you said earlier. considering the pros and cons, thinking
Right.
about it not through all just an emotional thing, but actually making sure you're getting the logical brain in on the decision as well.
Right. And then, sometimes the quitters do that because then there's constant upheaval and constant change. And so they're just always having to deal with that and not really ever having to settle down and deal with true problems.
Yes,
You know what I
yes,
mean?
that can be, yes.
So, all right. So the other extreme kind of person when it comes to thinking about moving on to a new job is the lingerers.
Yes, and lingerers, opposite of quitters,
Yeah.
the other end of the spectrum, they stay too long. These people,
Are often miserable.
Yes.
I came across some lingerers that, it's like, well, why don't you just, if you're so miserable and you don't like it here, why don't you just find something new to do that makes
Yeah.
you happy? Oh, no, they always have a bazillion reasons why they can't, and then they just complain all the time.
yeah, and I mean, there are legitimate reasons to leave, but the thing is,
And in some cases, you can't. Maybe
Right.
responsibilities and
Sure.
whatever.
but fortunately, we have more options today than ever. But the thing is, lingerers miss out on the alternatives that are being created in the dynamic marketplace in which we operate. Staying put doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get to move up the corporate ladder. Doesn't mean that. You may be better served by moving on to a new job and or a new career. So the problem people run into here is these are the people who hate change to some extent, right? And so they're willing to live with the status quo, and they think that somehow by not shaking things up, they're not taking risk. But in some cases, especially in a marketplace that moves as quickly as the marketplaces we operate in today, in those cases, sometimes that tendency to linger, to stay put, to accept the status quo is actually the riskiest thing you can possibly do. And a lot of people just don't realize it.
Well, coming up, there's 3 things that you need to know about when it comes to moving on. And we're going to share those with you after this word from our sponsor, financialfreedomtool.com. Plenty of money for life.
Looking for money to start your business? The Financial Freedom Tool helps you uncover money hidden in your budget so you can start your business sooner than you think. Learn more at financialfreedomtool.com. That's financialfreedomtool.com.
Today we're talking about that feeling that you get sometimes that, it's time to move on to a new job. But is it? Are my feelings correct? We're going to share 3 things to know to help you be able to sort through this very difficult decision. And number 1 is to understand your underlying fears.
Now, quickly, let's kind of review. So we're talking about an article that inspired this show, written by Carlin Flora for Psychology Today. And she describes 2, quiz coming up, Marilyn. She describes 2 extreme kinds of people.
Right.
I want you to answer those 2. What are the 2 extreme kinds of
Well, there
people?
were the quitters and there were
Okay.
the lingerers.
And quitters do what?
Quit too soon.
Lingerers do what?
Stay too long.
There you go. We're caught up. So now, here's the thing that I found really interesting that she points out is that quitters may suffer from an abnormal fear of intimacy. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, well,
It's intimacy.
if I don't stick around, I don't have to deal with all the troubles and
Exactly,
the problems. I can
yes.
just, I can just spring onto a new thing.
So whereas lingerers may have an inordinate fear of failure.
Oh, well, if I were to change, then maybe I wouldn't be able to achieve the same success that I have right here where I am.
Yeah, so this just really kind of tells us that we need to pay attention to our fears and also really ask ourselves when we're thinking about big decisions like this is what's driving the desire to do this? What's driving your desire to consider leaving or staying? You got to face your fears so that you make the best decision for your future.
Another thing that you need to know as you're making this decision about whether to stay or whether to go is to learn from your past experiences.
Yeah, and the best way to do this is simply go back and think about past exits, we'll call them. So past exits, and that's going to help you avoid making the same mistakes all over again. Let's go back and make sure we've drawn all the lessons from times when we've left before. Did you burn a bridge? Did you hurt other people? What caused you pain as you recall this event? Thinking through all of that is going to help you make a better decision this time and time your exit. So think carefully about what you did right, what you would change if given the chance, and then apply that to your current situation. And that's going to guide you to make the right decision right now.
And just thinking about some of our younger listeners who maybe don't have much of a path to go on.
Yes.
What should they think about?
Find a mentor, you know, like who's your mentor? Ask your professors if you're still in college, you know, I mean, there's any number of people, but an adult that you really admire and that you've seen succeed, you know, it doesn't have to be someone a lot older than you, just somebody who's experienced moving from one job to another, and just ask them the lessons they've learned. And, you know, the good news about that is the one thing that's better than learning from your own mistakes is learning from someone else's mistakes.
Amen. All right. And then one more thing that you should know about moving on is cut yourself some slack.
Yeah, I'd like to say it like this, Marilyn. Cut yourself some slack, Jack.
Yeah.
Once you've made your decision, accept it or change it. Just don't continue to fret about it on and on and on and
you
on.
drive yourself crazy.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So, you know, we live our lives in eras, E-R-A-S, an era.
Okay.
Okay? It's kind of a hard
The
word
era
to say.
of George.
Yes, there you go. But you know, we have many eras, if you think about it, kind of running simultaneously
What do you mean?
through our lives at all times. What do I mean? Well, so like we have the era of being a father of an infant child. At some point, that's going to be the father or mother of a teenager.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, well, see that? Exactly right, Mary Lynn. I was going to go to toddler next, but you know, I was trying to hold off the teenagers part. But then they're young adults, right? Then they're out on their own. We move from being, you know, a family with, you know, kind of a traditional family, let's say, with you know, parents and children. We move to being, you know, we start out being empty nesters, so to speak. We start with no children. Then we have kids. Now we're parents living together. At some point, we're going to be empty nesters. All of these things are, you know, we have a job here, a job there, you know, a different job there. We're changing careers. We're changing jobs. Those are eras.
Yeah.
So you understand where all these things are happening simultaneously. Okay. So that's the point, is that it's only natural that one or more of these eras is coming to an end at any given point in our lives. So learning when it's time to say when, in other words, what we're doing here is, this isn't just a show about changing jobs. It's about moving on.
Change in
all
general.
Yes. And that's what you've got to get good at doing, especially in a world that changes faster than our ability to change ourselves. So learning when it's time to say when and how to do it will make your job and or career transition smoother. It will make any changes in life, any transitions smoother. So like timing your move smartly leads to big success.
And before you move on to another podcast episode, if you wouldn't mind giving us a review of 5 stars if you enjoyed this one, we'd greatly appreciate it. Helps us get the word out about Big Success to even more people.
And we thank you so much for listening today.
Until next time,
Here's to your big success.
Find big success at biggsuccess.com.